Hi, folks. Hope you are doing well. Today, we are going to start a new series on international marketing, and this is going to be the first lecture of this series. So, in this lecture, we are going to discuss the basics of international marketing. So, what are the learning outcomes from this session? By the end of this session, you will be able to describe the concept of international marketing, explain the difference between international and domestic market, discuss the principles of international marketing, explain the benefits of international marketing, and finally, focus on emerging opportunities of international markets. So, when I talk about the international marketing, we have to understand that international marketing refers to marketing carried out by companies overseas or across national borders. This strategy uses an extension of the techniques used in the home country of the firm. So the techniques are more or less similar to the techniques that are employed or deployed within the domestic markets. So international marketing is simply the application of marketing principles to more than one country. So, however, there is a crossover between what is commonly expressed as international marketing and global marketing, which are almost, I would say, similar terms. So the intersection is the result of the process of internationalization. Now, for instance, let us say we have to understand, or we can see that many American and European authors, they see international marketing as a simple extension of exporting, whereby the marketing mix, that is the four P's, is simply adapted in some way to take into account differences in consumers and segments. Now, then what follows, what ensues, that global marketing takes a more standardized approach to world markets and focuses upon sameness, that is similarity, or in other words, the similarities in consumers and segments. Now, if I give you the definition given by American Marketing Association, international marketing is the multinational process of planning and execution, or executing, I would say, planning and executing the conception, pricing, promotion, and distribution of ideal goods and services to create exchange that satisfy individual and organizational objectives. So, just a basic understanding. I have put some major crux on this slide. That is, the word international marketing is defined as the exchange of goods and services across national borders to meet the requirements of the customers. Now, it includes everything that marketing includes, right? It includes customer analysis in foreign countries and identifying the target market. This is what we generally do. So, when we think of international marketing, we have to understand that there are two major entities. One is the company, and then the second one is the international market. So I have to understand the international market, the customers in that market, what are their needs, what are their requirements, and then provide them those products and services in exchange of money, right? That's quite obvious. So we do everything that, it starts from the market analysis, the customer analysis, everything based on which we define what kind of marketing mix we need to deploy. So we would be discussing the entire concepts of international marketing throughout this series. Fine. So when we are talking about international marketing, that involves all the activities. Okay, you cannot think of international marketing as something unique. It consists of all the activities that form part of domestic marketing. An enterprise, for example, which is engaged in international marketing, has to correctly identify, assess, and interpret the needs of the overseas customers and carry out integrated marketing operations to satisfy these needs. To simplify, in other words, the basic functions are the same in international marketing as well as that in the domestic marketing, right? So you have to understand this. But many a times, this is just for your understanding, I would say there is one major problem. Okay, one major problem that you may encounter when you are into international marketing, that is the environmental and cultural dynamics of global markets. Many a times, many companies, the biggest of all multinational companies, have committed serious blunders in this international marketing because they don't understand the culture or the people, the heterogeneity of the people in various countries. They probably do not do sufficient research when they enter other countries. For instance, when Kellogg's came to India, they failed miserably. Reason being, they did not understand the milk consuming habits of Indians. We as Indians, we boil milk and then we consume. But Americans, they simply, they grab a carton of milk, grab a can of milk from their refrigerator and consume it directly. This doesn't happen in India. So just think, when Kellogg's entered in India, they provided the same kind of cereals that they used to sell, and they were the world's leader in selling cereals. Now, when Indians poured the hot boiling milk over the cereals, they became soggy and mushy and they were horrible to eat. They failed. But when they did the research, they understood the milk consuming habits of Indians, and then they created a more indigenized version of their cereals, which would not crumble, which would not become mushy or soggy when they were used along with hot boiling milk. So this is how, if you fail to understand the global perspective, the global culture, or the culture prevalent in the host countries where you enter, then you are bound to fail miserably. So one major thing that many a times marketeers ignore is the environmental and cultural dynamics of global markets. So you need to keep this in mind. Fine. So moving ahead, who are the major participants in international marketing? So these are the major participants. One could be multinational corporations, those corporations which span or which have operations in more than one country, more than or beyond their parent country, you can say. Okay, there are plenty of examples: Coke, Pepsi, all these are multinational companies. Okay, and then you have exporters, you have importers, and then you have service companies. When I say exporters, exporters are those people who sell beyond their country, and importers are those countries which buy from others. Like most of the countries are importers of crude oil, right? Then you have service companies. Service companies are those companies, for instance, like audit firms or law firms, legal firms, right? So, for instance, Deloitte, they are one of the leading audit firms, and they provide their services across various nations, right? These are some of the major participants in the international marketing arena. Now, what are the main functions in international marketing? Let us discuss one by one in detail. Now, the first major function is choosing the basic route for global marketing. Now, we will discuss this in great detail, but I would just give you the basic essence of this. Now, when we are talking about the choosing the basic route, now you have to understand, or you have to properly conceive an entry strategy in the starting point itself. Now, there could be around 5 major basic routes to enter a foreign market. One is exports. Second could be licensing of technology and know-how. Third could be multinational trading. Fourth could be joint ventures. Or fifth could be full-fledged global operations. Now, we would discuss all of them in great detail in the forthcoming lectures, but you can remember these 5 entry routes for the time being. One is exports. Second is licensing of technology and know-how. Third is multinational trading. Fourth is joint ventures. And fifth is the full-fledged global operations. Fine. Likewise, second could be selecting the market and product selection. Okay, that is market selection and product selection. Which market should I enter and which product should I sell? Many a times the companies, they don't sell all the products in all the markets, so they need to select some ideal market and the ideal product which could do wonders in that. Okay, so this is also a main function. Then selecting the distribution channels. Now what would be the distribution channel? Okay, that also is a big decision to make. And then developing the pricing strategy. Many a times, like recently, you may be observing that how Netflix is betting upon the Indian market. This is one of the largest market they have bet upon, and they have high hopes from the Indian market. So they are customizing the pricing strategies when they are coming into India, and every now and then they are tweaking with their pricing strategy. Okay, even today there was a news that they have reduced the prices in India in order to attract more and more audience. So when you enter an international market, you have to tweak around with your pricing strategy. Then you have the international marketing communications. This is very sensitive area. Now you cannot use the same kind of a communication in various countries when you enter. Reason being, there could be various meanings which could be derived out of your basic use of words. So you have to understand the context, the connotation, the culture, and the subtleties of the language which people use or speak. Now, the way we use English also would be entirely different from the native speakers of English. So in that case, the context that is derived out of every word could have multiple meanings. So you have to use your communication very effectively, and you have to do proper research before you launch any marketing campaign, right? And then mastering the procedural complexities. Now, again, every economy, every country has got their own procedures, own tax laws, everything. The kind of documentations you have, everything is different, and this is a complex task. Now, when you are planning to venture into international markets, you have to look into these complexities and understand them, and should ensure that you are not breaking any law or any regulation also. And then you have your organizational adaptations. Within the organization also, the labor laws could be different, the work habits, work cultures could be different, working hours could be different. So in that case, you have to work according to the local regulations. So you have to adapt your organization to those laws of the land or those practices of the land, right? And then one of the most important things is the ethics. Again, ethics is very, very sensitive area, and at the same time it's amorphous. Every country has got a different philosophy for ethics. Now, what is ethical in one country may not be ethical in the other. So when you are entering an international market, you have to take care of the ethics and ensure that the ethical standards are in place and you are following or giving the best example of being ethical. Now, let us discuss the differences between international and domestic marketing. Now, when I talk about international and domestic marketing, the striking difference between international and domestic marketing lies in the environment in which these two take place. Now, the important points of difference between the international and domestic marketing, I would say first one is the sovereign political entities. That is, each country is a sovereign political entity, and therefore they, for importing and exporting the goods and services, in order to safeguard their national interests impose several restrictions. The traders in international market have to observe such restrictions. Now, these restrictions may fall maybe in any of the following categories. Okay, I'm just giving you a few categories maybe, and these restrictions fall under those things and those categories maybe. First could be the tariffs and the custom duties. Okay, now tariffs and custom duties on import and export of goods and services in order to make them costly in the importing country and not to ban their entry into the country completely. Now, if I'm increasing the tariffs, if I'm increasing the tax while importing, what's happening is I'm trying to discourage the imports. I don't want more of that product to enter the country, and probably that could be a threat to the local production. So I'm not banning it completely, but at the same time, I'm restricting its entry into the country using tariffs, right? So, for example, in the post-war period, the efforts of central, or I would say the efforts of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which we popularly called as GATT, which no longer exists, but then there has been a significant reduction in tariff globally and on regional basis due to the emergence of regional economic groupings. Okay, so one major tool or instrument for the sovereign political entities could be tariffs. Second could be the quantitative restrictions. They are also imposed with an intention to restrict trade in some specific commodities. Now, the major objective behind this restriction is the protection of homegrown industries, okay, the home businesses from competition of foreign commodities. So, another thing which I would say the quantitative restrictions or the quotas are fixed, okay, and the third one could be the I would say like exchange control, right? We are controlling the exchange in another restriction. Okay, this is also a restriction imposed by almost every sovereign state. Now, what the government does is, in some cases, does not ban the entry of goods in the country, but the importer is not allowed the necessary foreign exchange to make the payment for the goods imported. But in some cases, exchange control and let us say quantitative control are put together along with the grant of import license. So, to put it simply, the government doesn't want to ban, but it wants to restrict. So, what it does is it imposes a restriction on the amount of exchange or foreign exchange that could be provided to an importer. So, when limited money is provided to an importer, he may be able to purchase only goods of that worth. So excessive imports are discouraged. Okay, so sometimes what is happening, the exchange restriction is coupled with the quantitative restrictions also. Okay, so they are fixing a quota of both the amount which could be imported as well as the foreign exchange that could be sent out of the country, right? Another I would say another restriction that sovereign governments impose is imposition of the local taxes on imported goods with an objective to make the import goods costlier. Now, when imported goods become costlier, it's quite obvious that people would prefer the local goods, right? So impose more taxes, and then what happens is that we are encouraging the sale of the home products. Okay, so when we are talking about sovereign political entities, this is, these are the ways in which different governments impose their restrictions. You would see that, when I would give you examples of Harley Davidson, for instance. Harley Davidson left India and they were always cribbing about the heavy taxes that were levied within the Indian territory. So they always accused that Indian government was imposing heavy taxes And during those days, even the president of United States, that is Donald Trump, in those days, okay, he also tried to threaten that they will also impose heavy taxes on goods or services exported from India. But probably the Indian government did not give in to that kind of threatening. So Harley Davidson had no choice but to leave the country. We can't debate whether it was a right thing to happen or not, but these are certain restrictions that various sovereign political entities impose. Moving on to the second one, that is different legal systems. And when we talk about different countries, definitely they operate different legal systems and they all differ from each other. Now, most of the countries follow English common law as probably modified from time to time as per their requirements. For example, Japan and Latin American countries are important exceptions, okay? Because the reason is the existence of different legal systems make the task of businesses more difficult and complex, as they are not sure about the particular system will apply to their transactions. Okay, so what kind of system would apply to their transactions, they are not sure. And when there is uncertainty, there's always complexity, right? Now this difficulty does not arise in domestic trade, as the laws are the same for the whole country. Thirdly, we would say different monetary systems. Now each country has its own monetary system, and the exchange rates, right, for each country's currency are fixed under the rules framed by the IMF, and therefore they are more or less fixed. However, in recent years, you would have observed, right, the exchange rates are fluctuating and are being determined by the demand and supply forces. Now, some countries operate multiple rates. When I say multiple rates, that is different rates are applicable to different transactions. So that makes things even complex. So when we are into international markets, this monetary system, the disparity in exchange rates, all these things make things quite complex. Then another factor which differentiates the international versus the domestic markets is the lower mobility of factors of production. Now, what is that? Now, when I say mobility of different factors of production is less as between nations than in the country. Within the country, there is more mobility of factors of production, but when it comes to between countries, the mobility of factors of production is quite lower. That is, you have to understand, like, let us take the example of labor. Within the country, I can move to different areas and I can find a job. But moving within various countries is significantly difficult, right? But however, with the advent of air transport, the mobility of labor has increased, right? But again, it's difficult. Getting visas and all are again a complex task. Similarly, the development of international banking has increased the mobility of capital and as well as labor. In spite of these developments, I would say always that the mobility of labor and capital is not as much as it is within the country itself. Okay. And when we talk about other factors of production, forget about it. There's no mobility, right? And then we have differences in market characteristics as well. Now, market characteristics in each segment are different. That is, the demand patterns, the channels of distribution, the methods of promotion, all of them are quite different from the market to market. Now, if we take each country a separate market, we can assume different market characteristics there. Now, these differences are accentuated due to the existence of maybe government controls and regulations. However, this is a difference of degree only. Now, even in one single country, in India, just take for instance, like I have plenty of states, every state, every system is different, but this thing, the degree is higher when I go to a different country altogether. Okay. And then we have difference in procedures and documentations as well. Now the countries hold laws and customs of trade. In each country demand different procedures and documentary requirements for the import and export of goods and services. Now the traders residing in the country or territory have to comply, they have to follow the rules and regulations and customs if they want to import and export goods and services. Okay, so these are the major differentiating factors between international and domestic marketing. Moving on, let us discuss the principles of international marketing. Now, when I talk about principles of international marketing, there are three major principles. First one is the customer value and value equation. Now, when we are talking about the customer value and value equation, the task of marketing, we have to, always remember that even if we are talking about international marketing, the basic concepts, the principles are the same as that of marketing. So the task of marketing is to create customer value that is greater than the value created by the competitors. If I'm able to provide more value to the customer than the competition, only then I can survive in the market and I can dominate my competition. So the value equation is a guide to this task. Now, as suggested, like you have to understand as the value equation, the value for the customer can be increased by expanding or improving the product or the service benefits, by reducing the price, or by a combination of these elements. Simply put, what you have to do is you have to understand a basic equation. That is, what is value? Value equals benefits minus cost, the cost that the customer incurs. So the greater the value, if I wish to offer greater value, what I need to do is I need to increase the benefits in whichever way, by giving more features in the product, by giving a better product. And at the same time, what I can do is reduce the cost that the customer pays. Okay, either by decreasing the price or by doing any other thing which is within your hands. Okay, so that's what is the basic value equation. So what we have to understand again is companies with a cost advantage can use price as a competitive weapon. Now, knowledge of the customer combined with the innovation and creativity can lead to a total offering that offers superior customer value. If the benefits are strong enough and valued enough by the customers, a company does not need to be the low price competitor to win customers. So it's all about value. Think how we can give or drive more value to the customers, right? Second comes the competitive or differential advantage. Now, this is a great principle of international marketing. And when I talk about competitive advantage, it is a total offer vis-a-vis relevant competition that is more attractive to customers. Now, the advantage can exist in any element of the company's offer: the product, the price, the advertising, and the point of sale promotion or the distribution of the product. So any of these could do wonders. One of the most powerful strategies for penetrating a new national market is to offer a superior product at a lower price. And this is what MI has been doing, right? MI, Xiaomi phones, right? The OnePlus, what they are doing is they are providing the superior product at a lower price. And this is what a competitive advantage or the differential advantage that MI phones or Xiaomi phones are repeatedly doing, or this is what is their strength. Now, the price advantage will get immediate customers' attention, and for those customers who purchase the product, the superiority or the superior quality will make an impression, right? So this is what they have been doing. The best example I can give is the MI phones. Okay, so just keep that thing in mind. Now when we are talking about the third principle, that is focus. Now the third international marketing principle, or the focus or the concentration, I would say the concentration of attention. Now focus is required to succeed in the task of creating customer value at a competitive advantage. All great enterprises, okay, if you just think of any great enterprise, whether large or small, are successful because they have understood and applied the goal or the great principle of focus. Just take any example, Apple, they have focus. They produce great products, great design at a premium price. That's their focus. When I talk about MI, they have a focus. They are targeting the middle or lower middle class. That's their focus, right? When I talk about IBM, they succeeded and become a great company because it was more clearly focused on customers' needs and wants than any other company in the emerging data processing industry, right? Likewise, Dell or HP, they focused on giving computers or customers the computing power at a low price. But IBM, it was focusing entirely on big ticket customers, right? So this is what is focus. You need to have that focus. Now a clear focus on customer needs and wants and on the competitive offer is required to mobilize the effort that is needed to maintain a differential advantage. Now this can be accomplished only by focusing or concentrating resources and efforts on customer needs and wants and how to deliver a product that will meet those needs and wants, right? So these are all major principles of international marketing. Now coming to various marketing orientations. Okay, this is quite interesting. Now let us discuss one by one. The acronym is EPRG framework. E is ethnocentric, P is for polycentric, R is for regiocentric, and G is for geocentric. EPRG. Let us discuss one by one. First, let us say ethnocentric. Now, a person who assumes that his or her country is superior compared to the rest of the world is said to have that ethnocentric orientation. Now, the ethnocentric orientation means that the company personnel see only similarities in markets and assume the products and practices that succeed in home country will, due to their demonstrated superiority, be successful anywhere. Now, this is what their philosophy, their orientation is, that if any product or service was considered to be superior in my country, will definitely be considered to be superior in other countries as well. Okay, so that's their approach. Now, at some companies, the ethnocentric orientation means that the opportunities outside home country are ignored. Now, such companies are sometimes called domestic companies. Ethnocentric companies that do not conduct business outside the home country can be described as international companies. Now, they adhere to the notion that the products that succeed in their home country are superior and therefore can be sold everywhere without any adaptation. Okay. Further, if I add, let us say an ethnocentric company operates under the assumption that tried and true headquarters knowledge and organizational capabilities can be applied in any part of the world. Although this can sometimes work for the company's advantage, but many times may not. Now, Nissan, okay, is one of the glorious examples of ethnocentric orientation and was quite apparent during the first few years of exporting cars and trucks to the United States. Now, designed for mild Japanese winters, The vehicles were difficult to start in many parts of United States during the extreme cold winter months. So even if they were superior products in the home country, they failed miserably when they were exported to the American markets, right? So that is what is ethnocentric approach. Now let us come to the polycentric approach. Now the polycentric orientation is the opposite of ethnocentrism. Now the term polycentric describes the manager's often unconscious belief or assumption that each country in which a company does business is unique. Now, this assumption lays the groundwork of each subsidiaries to develop its own unique business and marketing strategies in order to succeed. The term multinational, I would say multinational company, is often used to describe such a structure. Now, Citicorp, I would give you an example like Citicorp's executive, they offered this description of the company. Okay, listen to this very carefully. We were like medieval state. We were like a medieval state. Okay, there was the kind and his court, and they were in charge, right? No, it was the land barons who were in charge. The kind and his court might declare that or that, but land barons went and did their thing. This is what he quoted. Now, realizing that the financial services industry in the global sync, CEO John Reed is simply attempting to achieve a higher degree of integration between Citicorp's operating units. Likewise, Jack Welch at GE, Reed is moving to instill a geocentric orientation throughout his company, right? So just understand, a polycentric approach is believing in the uniqueness of every market. Now, moving on, let us come to the geocentric and regiocentric approach. Now, if I talk about geocentric orientation, it represents a synthesis of ethnocentric and polycentrism. Okay, now it is a worldview that sees similarities and differences in markets and countries and seeks to create a global strategy that is fully responsive to the local needs and wants. Now, a regiocentric manager might be, let us say, said to have a world view on a regional scale. The world outside the region of interest will be viewed with a ethnocentric or a polycentric orientation or a combination of the two, right? So this is what the basic understanding. Now, if I say the ethnocentric company is centralized in its marketing management, the polycentric company is decentralized, and the regiocentric, okay, and the regiocentric and geocentric companies are integrated on a regional and global scale respectively. A crucial difference between the orientations is the underlying assumption for each. The ethnocentric orientation is based on the belief in home country superiority. Now, there is likelihood that geocentric company does not identify itself with the particular country. Therefore, you have to get this point that it is difficult to determine the firm's home country except the location of its headquarters and the corporate registration. So these are the basic marketing orientations. So remember the EPRG framework: ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric. Now, what are the various benefits of international marketing? So, major benefits, I would just briefly enumerate them. First is endurance. Now, every country is not that fortunate as USA in terms of infrastructure, size, resources, and opportunities. Hence, they must trade with other countries to survive. So, similarly, every country is not fortunate as India also, which has abundant natural resources and treasure of biodiversity, and it can survive within its resources even if there is a resource crunch. Now, even then, it has to carry out trading with other countries to get oil and maybe armaments for its own survival. Likewise, if I would say Hong Kong, it cannot survive without food and water from China. The countries of Europe have had similar experiences since most of the European nations are relatively small in size. Without foreign market, European firms would not have sufficient economics of scale to allow them to be competitive with the US firms. So in order to endure, in order to survive, you need to market your products internationally. So that is what is endurance. Secondly, I would say the progress of overseas markets. Now, developing countries, in spite of poor economy, having serious marketing problems, are excellent markets. The US has found that India is the biggest market in the world for consumer and engineering products. According to a report prepared by US Congress by the US trade representatives, Latin America and Asia are maybe experiencing the worst economic recession, though they have the potential in the world market. The American market cannot ignore the vast potential of international market. The world market is 4 times larger than the US market. In the case of, for example, Amway Corp, a privately held US manufacturer of cosmetic soaps, vitamins, health supplements, right? Japan represents a larger market than the US. So just see, many of the home firms, they find better opportunities overseas. So international marketing helps us to explore those opportunities. Then we have sales promotions. Foreign markets, they constitute a large share of total business of many firms that have cultivated market abroad. Many large US companies have done very well because of their overseas customers. There are many which I could name: IBM, Google, HP, Apple, Dell, right? So all of them, they sell more computers abroad than at home. The case of Coca-Cola clearly emphasizes the importance of overseas markets. Now, Coca-Cola is coming up with milk-based products, as majority of the Indians and Asians do not relish the taste of aerated drinks, which are supposed to be having caffeine and is addictive. Okay, then you can have the diversification in international markets. The cyclical factors as a recession and such seasonal factors as climate affect the demand for most of the product. Due to these variables, there are sales fluctuations which frequently is substantial enough to cause maybe layoffs of personnel. One way of diversifying a company's risk is to consider foreign markets as a solution for variable demands. So if I sell my products in multiple countries, then maybe seasonal fluctuations can be taken care of. If there is a seasonal problem in one country, then probably sales from other countries can, balance off the losses which could be incurred or which may have incurred in other countries. So that helps in diversification, right? Nextly, if we proceed, nextly, inflation and wholesale price index. Now, the best way to control inflation is to earn foreign exchange through exports. Now, imports can also be highly beneficial to a country because they constitute reserve capacity of the local economy. Now, without imports, there is no incentive for domestic firms to moderate their prices. The lack of imported product alternatives, they force consumers to pay more, resulting in inflation and excessive profit for local firms. So this development usually acts as a prelude to workers to demand higher wages, further exacerbating the problem of inflation. Now, import quotas imposed on Japanese automobiles, for instance, in 1980s, saved around 46,000 US production jobs, but at a cost of around 160,000 per job per year. So we have to understand that inflation, the WPI, all these things can be controlled through international marketing, that is imports and exports. Then comes your employment and placements. Now, tariff barriers and trade restrictions in certain countries contributed significantly to the Great Depression in the 1930s and have the potential to cause widespread unemployment again. Now, unrestricted trade, on the other hand, improve the world's GNP and enhances the employment generally for all nations. With the liberalization of economic policy in 1991, India has gained tremendously with the inflow of foreign directed investment, which we say FDI, as a result of which the employment in the country has tremendously improved. Okay, so you can see that international marketing helps in employments as well, right? And then standard of living or lifestyle. Now, trade affords countries and their citizens higher standard of living than otherwise possible. Without trade, product shortages force people to pay more for less. Now, products taken for granted, such as coffee and bananas, may be unavailable overnight. Okay, now, like in most of the countries, will be more difficult were it not being for, like, let us say, being for many strategic metal that must be imported. Now, for instance, steel. Okay, if there is a shortage of steel, life would be very, very difficult. Now, trade also makes it easier for industries to specialize and gain access to raw materials, while at the same time fostering competition and efficiency. So, due to international marketing, we are able to get a variety of products and we need not pay more for less. And at the same time, unnecessary shortages of essential commodities can be avoided. So our lives improve. Then comes the marketing process. Now, international marketing should be considered a special case of domestic marketing. As I have explained this earlier as well, that there is very little difference between domestic and international marketing. Only thing is that the word multinational has been added in the international marketing process. Otherwise, the marketing mix is the same for both. So with the improvement of IT, that is information technology, the access of international markets has become easy and the whole world has become a small global village. Now, talking about the emerging opportunities and international marketing. So we have this multinational companies or corporations or transnational corporations. Now, MNCs are a major players in world of international business. In India, the mention of MNCs usually elicit mixed reaction among the Indians. On one hand, MNCs are associated with exploitation and ruthlessness. They are often criticized for moving resources in and out of the country as they strive for profits without much regard for countries' social welfare or resources. Now, another thing could be like in defense of MNCs, more and more of them have been trying to be responsible members of the society. On the other hand, MNCs have power and prestige. Additionally, they create social benefits for facilitating economic balance. Now, as explained by Miller, with response or with resources, capital, food, and technology unevenly distributed around the planet and all in short supply, an efficient instrument of quick and effective production and distribution of a complex of goods and services is the first essential. Now, this instrument is the MNC. Okay, so likewise, the transnational corporations, the largest national market in the world, if I say the United States or China, they represent around 25% of the total world market for all products or services. Thus, US companies wishing to achieve maximum growth potential, they have to go global because 75% of the world market potential is outside their home country. Now, Coca Cola is one of the American based company that understands this. 82% of its like if I give you the figure of 1995, 82% of its 1995 operating income and 71% of its revenues were generated by its soft drink business outside the United States. Okay, non-US companies have an even greater motivation to seek market opportunities beyond their own borders. Their opportunities include the entire, the population of the United States. So many companies have recognized the importance of conducting business activities outside their home country. Now, industries that were strictly national in scope only a few years ago are dominated today by a handful of global companies. Now, the rise of global companies closely parallels the rise of national corporation, which emerged from local and regional corporation in the 80s and in the 1880s and 1890s in the first quarter of 20th century. Now, there were thousands of auto companies in the world and more than 500 in the United States alone. Today, fewer than 20 companies remain worldwide, and only two of them are American. Now, in most industries, the companies that will survive and prosper in the next country will be the global companies. Now, some companies that do not respond to the challenges and opportunities of globalization will be will be absorbed by more dynamic enterprise. Others will simply perish or disappear. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.